Uh-oh.
In her last two fights. Good way hitting him from that way down.
Welcome to the motherfucking relay. We're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this. The latest from the women's junior middleweight division, amateur standout Mary Spencer of Canada will be taking on a familiar face. She will be taking on the United Kingdom's own April Hunter for what is the vacant WBA gold title in the women's junior middleweight division. It wasn't that long ago that the WBA made an effort, a conscious effort, to phase out all of these secondary and trinket titles, but now they're bringing them back. The resurgence of the WBA gold title in men's boxing, in women's boxing, it appears the WBA is intent to inundate the sport with as many interim, secondary, and trinket titles as they can to collect sanctioning fees from that many more fighters, from that many more fights.
It is what it is.
Set to go down June 6th, which is really just a matter of weeks. It's right around the corner. April Hunter. April is a fighter who's fought under the Matchroom banner, very briefly, under the Matchroom banner, then under the Boxer banner. I don't think she's with Boxer anymore, 29 years old.
To Mary Spencer, who's 39, April's 10 years younger than Mary, though not as skilled and not as strong.
Not as long and limber as the very statuesque and physically imposing, aggressive Mary Spencer. Mary stands in at practically 6 feet tall.
Just about. She's 5'11".
Whereas April is a more modest 5'9", sporting a professional record of 7 wins with 1 loss, no draws, no recorded knockouts. Having never been knocked out in 8 professional bouts, she has since avenged her lone defeat to the United Kingdom's own Kirsty Bavington. They had 2 fights between them. Kirsty won the first one. April won the second.
Now she's fighting Mary.
Mary Spencer, who sports a professional record of 8 wins with 2 losses, no draws, 6 knockouts, having never been knocked out in 10 professional bouts. They have about the same level of experience as professionals, the same level of experience, close to the same number of fights, but they don't have the same ceiling. Mary Spencer comes from the kind of amateur background that April Hunter doesn't come from, the kind of pedigree April doesn't have, and that's what I think is going to separate them.
That and Mary's power.
Mary Spencer is a strong puncher, a very strong puncher, and if she can land, she can do a lot of damage. Last in action earlier this year, opposite the ring, Sonia Drilling, who she managed to retire in a corner after 1 round, effectively rebounding off her 2 back-to-back losses to world champion Femke Hermans. Femke is the only woman to ever defeat Mary Spencer, but Femke is a far more experienced fighter, just far more experienced than Mary, and far more experienced than April. April Hunter, who was last in action in July of last year opposite the ring, Kirsty Bavington, who I mentioned earlier. April won the rematch.
Yeah, she won that fight, but she ain't winning this one.
She's not. For some time now, Mary Spencer has had her eye on April Hunter, saying, I've always wanted to fight April Hunter. And on June 6th, she will become the hunted.
What you need to know.
So when Mary Spencer lost those 2 fights to Femke Hermans, it would have been easy to write her off. It would have been easy to say it's over for her, she's too old, she doesn't have what it takes, but that's not reality and that's not true. Femke Hermans is a professional, was a lot more experienced than Mary Spencer, and that's what took Mary by surprise. Well, that's not what she's going to be facing in April Hunter. She's going to be facing a fighter with about the same level of pro experience as herself, without the amateur background and without the power, because Mary's got buckets, and I mean buckets of punching power when she can deliver it. She may have struggled to land with Femke Hermans due to Femke's veteran tactics, but I don't think she's going to struggle at all with April. I think she's going to brutalize her. I think she's going to knock her out because April ain't got nothing to keep Mary on the outside, and she doesn't have the veteran tactics and experience of a Femke Hermans.
To use Mary's aggression against her and set it up for counters? Yeah, April ain't got that.
So Mary's gonna do what Mary does. Close the distance, land hard punches, and get April Hunter out of there. April may have never been stopped before, but I think she's about to. I think she's about to get stopped in June.
There's a first time for everything.
April Hunt is gonna get knocked out for the first time. I've got Mary. Mary by way of knockout or technical knockout. Men's super bantam and lightweight news. His Excellency Turki Al-Sheikh has named Javante Davis versus Naoya Inoue on his list of dream fights that he wants to make. If they reach the right weight and give us the right proposal, we can deliver it. Now, this would be contingent upon the cooperation of both teams, both Team Davis and Team Inoue. And while Team Davis might be receptive to fighting a fighter who is so much smaller, moving up so many weight classes to fight him, I don't think the same is true in reverse. Inoue made it clear that he plans on staying at 122 for the foreseeable future. Why would you expect a guy who really just got to 122 to shoot past 126, past 130, all the way up to 135?
Inoue hasn't been at 122 a full year yet. He had only just arrived there in late July of last year for the Stephen Fulton fight, where Javante Davis comparatively has been at 135 for something like 5 years.
4 or 5, just about. He first moved up to 135 in 2019 for the Gamboa fight. He's been there ever since. Why is there no pressure on Javante Davis to move up in weight, to move up to 140?
There were good fights up there for him. Subriel Matias, Teofimo Lopez, Isaac Cruz is up there. He fought him before.
Devin Haney still got the WBC title up there. Don't you see what I'm getting at? Things are too lopsided. You're expecting a naturally smaller fighter who's already moved up in weight more times than Javante to move up even more, because Javante's not going to come down. He's not going to meet him in the middle.
It's too lopsided.
And for what? So that Javante Davis can fight a naturally smaller fighter than himself? Look at all of the contemporaries he has right there in his own division. Shakur Stevenson, Vasyl Lomachenko,
The winner of this weekend's fight.
Emmanuel Navarrete, or Denis Perenchik. Whoever wins and whoever becomes WBO champion, he's got plenty of action, plenty of opponent options right there where he is, that we shouldn't be putting pressure on a naturally smaller fighter, a much, much smaller fighter, to move all the way up to 135 so Javante could have it easy.
They shouldn't encourage him.
Javante Davis is the same guy who, when he moved up to 140 for a split second, he stuck a rehydration clause on Mario Barrios. He stuck a rehydration clause and a catch weight on Ryan Garcia.
Because he didn't want them to have a weight advantage over him.
But he's supposed to have a weight advantage over Inoue. Is that how it works? That's a double standard, and it shouldn't be encouraged.
It shouldn't be allowed.
Enabling Javante Davis and his team's cowardice and those who would support him. He has enough contemporaries right there between 135 and 140 that there shouldn't be talk of fighting a super bantamweight. It's ridiculous.
Weight classes exist for a reason. Javante knows that. That's why he used weight stipulations before.
I don't actually think this happens. I don't. Inoue is not so strapped for cash, so desperate for money, that he's gonna move past 126, past 130, land at 135.
No.
He already makes fantastic money for a super bantamweight. He's already a megastar in his own neck of the woods, that he doesn't need to play these games for a few more dollars. He doesn't need to do this.
And I don't expect him to.
Javante needs to fight people his own size. He needs to fight people at his own weight. There are 3 other belts in the lightweight division. If Turki Al-Sheikh wants to make a fight involving Javante, well, then let it be one of those fights with one of those champions that are right there.
Make a Shakur Stevenson fight.
Shakur wants to fight him. He can't stop talking about him. They're both champions at the same weight. The stage is set. They have history. Make that fight.
That makes more sense.
If anybody has the means and the money to make a fight like that happen, given what Javante's gonna want and what Shakur's gonna want. It's Turkey al Sheikh.
Make that fight.
Why are we encouraging Javante Davis to fight someone so much smaller than he is? He's supposed to be a tank. He's supposed to have all this punching power. Well, let him put it on display against the champions at his own weight, because for as long as Javante's been around, he's never unified a title anywhere.
He didn't do it at 130, even though there were plenty of champions around, and he hasn't done it here at 135. What is he waiting for?
Now, just in keeping with the theme of Javante Davis fights and what weight stipulations may be attached to them, Frank Martin, who's set to face Javante Davis very soon, took to the spaces yesterday and spoke to some of the fans, and he indicated that there may be a rehydration clause in his upcoming fight with Javante Davis, which is peculiar because they both campaign at the same weight. Nobody's moving up for this fight, so why would there be any weight stipulations in play unless you're trying to handicap this guy? You're trying to handicap the fighter.
That's how most people interpreted it.
Though, according to Javante Davis, I'm not sure what the fuck y'all are talking about, but if it's true, y'all are telling me that I have enough power to tell the WBA what to do? I don't even know what the fuck is going on. To which Errol Spence Jr. replied, yeah, it's a new WBA rule.
It's important to note that the IBF, not the WBA, the IBF for some time now have had a 10-pound rehydration cap on all of their title fights.
That's saying that if you're fighting for the IBF title, you don't get to rehydrate but so much unless it's a unification match, unless there's more than one alphabet title on the line. In that situation, the cap is waived and you can rehydrate to whatever you want to rehydrate to.
That's how it is.
Now, if the WBA has so decided to take a similar course of action in their title fights moving forward, that's news to me because no official announcement has been made. Perhaps there is one pending, that moving forward, the WBA will have a rehydration cap as well.
There's a thing called weight bullying.
I'm sure you've heard of it. Fighters that cut massive amounts of weight to campaign in certain divisions, so the night of a fight, they have a size advantage that once they rehydrate,
They'll be a lot bigger than the other guy.
this is thought of as being unethical in some circles, though not all. I myself, I'm not too hung up on it because when you're cutting a lot of weight on a regular basis, you may be able to get away with it for a while, but it's going to catch up and your performance, your punch resistance is going to suffer for it. That's what happened to Jarrett Hurd at 154. This was a guy who was walking around something like 200 pounds, cutting all the way down to 154. For a while he was solid, for a while, then out of the clear blue sky, all his punch resistance was gone.
That's the consequence.
And that's why I'm not as hung up on that practice as some other people. Some others look at it as unfair, unethical, having that much size over the other guy the night of a fight. I look at it as sooner or later it's going to backfire. Sooner or later it's going to catch up to you.
So enjoy it while it lasts.
Not everyone is as dismissive of this practice as I am, but for those who are hung up on it, you know, a 10-pound rehydration cap across the board. Say the WBA, the WBO, and the WBC implemented a 10-pound rehydration cap on all their title fights, the same as the IBF. That would eliminate that problem. It would theoretically force fighters to campaign at the appropriate weight given their physical dimensions and what they rehydrate to, as to prevent any unfair weight advantages the night of a fight for those people.
That if you got a guy who by all rights should be campaigning as a welterweight, but he's hiding out at lightweight or super lightweight, this would force that guy to campaign at the right weight for him. Now that guy might get found out up there.
Boxing is a risky business. It's a dangerous sport. If you got a guy at super middleweight who rehydrates somewhere in between light heavyweight and cruiserweight, same deal. This would theoretically force that fighter to campaign at the appropriate weight given his physical dimensions and what he rehydrates to, essentially remedying that problem, if you even want to call it a problem. Some people do. Some people don't like that practice, even though it's widespread.
Though once again, the WBA haven't released an official announcement saying that this is going to be in their bylaws moving forward. It all seems to be word of mouth.
We'll see if they address it sometime this week. Elsewhere in the world of boxing, Forbes has once again tabulated the highest earning boxers in all of boxing, the highest earners in the sport. Canelo Alvarez comes in at number 1, 85 million. Anthony Joshua comes in just behind him at 83. Tyson Fury at 50 million. These are the only 3 boxers featured in Forbes' top 50 highest paid athletes list for 2024.
Where's Javante Davis?
Some sat in disbelief that the name of Javante Davis wasn't mentioned, but why would he be? Javante Davis, on a regular basis, his pay-per-views hover at around 200, just a little over, just a little under.
Well, he sold over 1 million with Ryan.
Yeah, and that was just with Ryan. He doesn't sell that on a regular basis. He doesn't move units like that on his own, which is what I've been telling you. Contrary to the opinions of a few fight fans and a few disingenuous content creators, Javante Davis is not among the top earners in all of boxing. Now, maybe he makes the most money at 135.
Maybe.
Now, you may be thinking to yourself,
So?
what difference does it make? Who cares who's making more money than who else? And it's relevant because oftentimes Javante Davis's fans will excuse what he's doing and how he maneuvers throughout his career because he's supposedly the face of boxing, supposedly the biggest name and the highest earner, when the numbers tell a very different story.
That's why it matters.
They would have you believe that it's okay when he doesn't fight a Teofimo or a Devin Haney or a Shakur Stevenson or Vasyl Lomachenko because he's so big, he's making so much doing what he's doing that he doesn't need them. Nothing could be further from the truth. Now, he's about to go in there and fight Frank Martin. I've nothing against Frank Martin, but Frank doesn't have the profile that those fighters have. So what are you going to move? What units are you going to move? How many pay-per-views are you going to sell with that guy?
I said it last year, right after the Ryan Garcia fight, that unless the quality of competition doesn't get better, those numbers are going to see a sharp decline. You might have been fortunate enough to sell over 1 million pay-per-views with Ryan Garcia's help, but that's it. There are not very many other fights like that at or around these weights.
You don't bring in those kinds of numbers on your own. So if you want to keep raking in the big bucks, you may have to start taking big risks. You might have to fight Shakur. You might have to fight some of these other guys at or around these weights because you're not going to make with Frank what you made with Ryan.
You won't.
And that's why his name doesn't appear on the Forbes list next to Canelo's or next to Anthony Joshua's, next to Tyson Fury's, because you don't actually make what they make. This whole thing about Tank being the face of boxing, it's a smokescreen.
Your fight purses and theirs are in different galaxies, and you don't have any major sponsorships or endorsements because you're a degenerate.
You can make a lot of money off of sponsorships. You can make a lot of money off endorsements, but the reason major brands don't attach themselves to a Javante Davis is because he's a fucking scumbag. All he's really known for is putting his hands on broads.
Companies don't want a guy like that representing them.
Major company is not going to select a domestic abuser as the ambassador for their brand, so he doesn't get that additional arm of revenue in between fights.
He does decent gates. I know he does decent at the gate, but at the box office...
And make no mistake, the real money you want to bring in is at the box office. At the box office, he hovers at around 200,000 buys. That's the baseline for a Davis fight. And unless the matchmaking gets better, that's going to stay the baseline.